What's going on, everybody? Today, we're gonna ask the question, were the cars of yesterday really so simple and easy to work on? And are the cars of today way too modern and complex for us to handle? And how through this discussion can we discover the origin of the takeover culture ruining the car community today? I'm the 27th Axe, and this is The Grind, an automotive show where we talk about the things that make our brain generate some sparks. Let's get into it. In order to really get this conversation in gear, we first have to decide what were the cars of yesterday and what are the modern cars of today. So for this discussion, we're going to consider the cars of yesterday to be cars from the 60s and the 70s, and the cars from the 2000s and up to modern day to be considered the modern cars. Now admittedly, this conversation is just a teeny bit generationally biased. If you were to ask the younger generation of people what they think about today's cars, they'd be like, oh my god, I don't know, but like, Apple CarPlay is cool and I love the new Tesla, so chic. Now if you were to ask the older generation what they thought about cars, they would say, back in my day you could take apart a whole car with a screwdriver, a hammer, and an open-end wrench. Today, I don't even know what's going on with these modern cars. Bleh. And interestingly, while that older generation could have taken that car apart and put it back together, that's true, they can't even find their own dipstick nowadays. And it's the same process to check your oil today as it was back then. The newer generation can't do it either, but they can at least hook up Bluetooth audio on their phone. Oh, and speaking of phones, hold on, I think I'm getting a call.
Hey Ben, what's going on?
Oh hey, I'm just telling everybody the difference between modern and old cars.
Yeah man, that's cool. It's crazy how much technology has changed over the years. I mean, think about it. When our parents were growing up, their phones were still operated by a dial. And nowadays we don't even have to dial people's phone numbers. We just hit a button and it goes through. We can even talk by video now, which is really crazy if you think about it.
Yeah man.
Alright, see you later.
Bye. It's crazy, isn't it? Back in the day, our parents were turning the dial on a phone to talk to each other. And the truth is, you're probably watching this video on a phone. Think about how wild that is. My point with all of this is that the world is constantly changing and evolving, and if we don't, we're gonna get lost in the shuffle. One of the arguments that tends to draw people in favor of the older cars versus the newer cars is carburation versus fuel injection. Now, a lot of people believe that carburation is simpler than fuel injection, and to some extent, that's not incorrect. After all, if it was an unseasonably hot or cold day and your car wasn't running right because the air-fuel mixture was now off, you could pop the hood and with a screwdriver, make the necessary adjustments and get it back up to running just like new. With a modern car, you can't do that. But what people forget is that the modern car is loaded with all kinds of sensors that detect the temperature and mass of the air entering the engine bay and make adjustments to the air-fuel mixture to help the car to run at its peak. The reason we sometimes get freaked out by things like the check engine light is because we don't know what it means. It's usually because a part has failed. That would be no different than a spring breaking on the carburetor. Now, truthfully, yes, it would be a lot easier to change a spring on a carburetor than to change, say, a fuel injector. But the payoffs that these modern systems give for reliability and for fuel economy versus power is so worth it. In fact, I guarantee you, if we were to have a lot of those old school systems in place on modern cars with today's inflation rates, you'd find that the cost of ownership would be just about the same, except that today's generation wouldn't even know how to turn that screwdriver to fix the carburetor in the first place. By now you should have an idea of where this road is going to. The argument of whether or not cars from yesterday are more complicated than cars of today is not really a talk about whether the tech was simpler or not. It's a topic of whether people understand how it works or not. Comparatively, today's cars are on the same level of complication as the rest of technology that we deal with in the world, as the cars of yesterday were on par with the technology of that time. To focus in on where the real problem lies with this issue, all we have to do is look at old school car culture and old school car meets. You still see them all over the place today, but I remember growing up as a young man, none of the guys at these meets were interested in me and my small four-door economy car. Even though I had put an exhaust and an intake, and I tried to hop it up a little bit and make it look special, and I loved driving it, heck, it was even a manual, none of that was good enough for these guys. They didn't care. They were too busy sitting in their lawn chairs by their Corvettes, their Chargers, their Mustangs, and their Camaros, and ignoring me and all of my friends. And if we had a Japanese car in the group, that was automotive heresy to these guys. They didn't want any part of us, and they didn't want to share that knowledge with us. And that's the real issue. Yet so many generations of car enthusiasts who were so stuck in their day that they refused to acknowledge or learn about the improvements in automotive designs. That doesn't mean that they can't still like and prefer the cars of their generation. That's totally fine. But to ignore the changes that are made, it's like ignoring the rest of the world around you. If we don't keep up with the rapidly rotating wheels of technology and the world around us, we're gonna fall behind and end up like the folks who can't put a chip card up in a reader, which is kind of weird to see because this is the same generation of people that were used to the floppy disk, which worked the exact same way. It's bizarre to think about, but it's true. And it's the reason why the automotive community has seen the birth of a huge problem known as takeovers. If Godzilla, and I don't mean the Nissan GTR, is meant to represent the danger of nuclear warfare, then the takeover kids can be made as just a dangerous example of what happens when information is not shared amongst generations. These kids gather in what appear to be normal car meets that end up resulting in almost riot-like behavior, not only doing dangerous things in their cars within their group, but then going beyond that and attacking people, damaging personal and private property. Now, most car enthusiasts will tell you that they find this type of behavior shameful and they don't approve of it. But some people think it's just normal car culture today, and it's not. But why would they know any better? Who's teaching them what normal car culture is? As a parent, I consider it my responsibility to teach my son to have fun, but to be a responsible individual. And that's especially true in the car scene. It's our responsibility to make sure that things like takeovers don't become another generational trend by teaching the next generation of auto enthusiasts the right way to act and not taking part in this garbage. So to sum it all up for you, the cars of today are not more complicated than the cars of yesterday when you compare them to the rest of technology in the world around them. And by staying up to date and sharing this information, we can keep ourselves from ending up not even knowing how to change our own oil, and hopefully prevent another generation of kids from getting involved in things like takeovers, but instead being helpful parts of their community and sharing that love of cars so we can keep these wheels turning for years to come. That's all for today, folks. I'm the 27th Axe. This has been The Grind, and remember to keep it in gear.